Good morning. We will look today at Revelation chapters 10 and 11. Yesterday was reading of 10, and with worship we didn't do that. But there's an interlude here in chapter 10 and most of chapter 11 between the blowing of the seventh trumpet, or the sixth trumpet, and the seventh trumpet. And there are two visions that come in these chapters as well. And the first one is that, John says, I saw a mighty angel coming down from heaven, wrapped in clouds, with a rainbow over his head. His face was like the sun, his legs like the pillars of fire. And I mean, when I think of angels, I guess I picture them as white and radiant, but I don't picture them having legs like fire. I mean, that's not quite, it's a different image that comes here. And so much of Revelation is that. It's a little bit different image than we're used to thinking about. But this mighty angel holds in his hands a tiny scroll. And this mighty angel, you can tell you that he puts one foot on the land and one foot on the sea. And it's, if I put a foot on the sea, it's going to go to the bottom and sit, be on the sand. But this mighty angel, when I picture that mighty angel, I don't picture his foot on the sea as just a foot from shore. I picture a mighty angel, huge, and his foot is probably 15 feet out into the sea, and 15 feet into land. It's a widespread stance. So it's a reminder of how Jesus walked on the water. That, that the physics, the gravity, the things of earth that rule us in so many ways have no bearing with heaven and earth, with heaven and with the angels. And just as Jesus walked on the waters, this angel is able to stand, support the weight on the water. But he holds his little scroll, and it's open in his hand. And he gives a great shout. It says like a lion roaring. And I've got, grandkids sometimes, I can roar, make these loud noises to try to scare you. But it's, the roar of a lion. I remember going to the movies and growing up in McHenry, the MGM lion would come on and you'd have that big roar, and it was always a little bit disconcerting when I would hear that lion roar. And if I was to hear a lion roaring, in the wild, sometimes even just a cat, will go meow at you, and it's just kind of a little bit of a start. But, the roar of a lion has authority, puts fear. It's an intimidating sound. So this, it makes the sound of a great lion, a lion roaring, and he shouts, and it says the seven thunders sounded. So at the sound of this angel's voice, the seven thunders sound as well. Again, more noise, more commotion, more things to upset you and to try to, and you think about if you're walking around outside and there's a flash of thunder and the lightning, you look and you hear it, and it's, the thunder can startle you somewhat, but it's there, and it's just I don't know, it shows us the difference between heaven and earth, and, and so many different things that way. And, the voice from heaven comes and says, seal up what these seven thunders have said and do not write it down. So John can't tell us anything of what those seven thunders were. And so, so evidently the seven thunders were able to be interpreted as to a message of some sort. And then this angel raises his right hand and swears by him who lives forever and ever. So the angel swears by God, and and we're told in the Bible that we shouldn't swear by any such a thing, but let our yes be yes and our no be no. But yet here, the angel is saying to God that by your will, these words will be sealed up, and but then it says, when the seventh day, when the seventh angel is about to blow his trumpet, the mystery will be fulfilled, and it'll be revealed, announced that way. And then John is instructed to take this scroll and to eat it. We don't normally eat paper, and that's, the scroll would have been paper, papyrus, or I mean, well, in heaven it's hard to know what a scroll would be made out of. Maybe, but so, and the angel says, take it. It will be bitter in your stomach, but sweet in your mouth. And, and there are certain foods that I enjoy to eat, but later on, my digestive system says, you shouldn't have done that. So I can understand this, how something can be sweet in our mouths and taste good to us and be something that we enjoy eating. And then, you just get this terrible rolling in your gut, and sometimes we talk about having a gut instinct and things that way, and, our systems speak to us that way. So anyway, God is saying, the angel, the scroll is saying to us that, what we hear sometimes sounds really good. But the reality of what we hear when it, isn't all that great, and so we need to be careful about a lot of things of what we allow ourselves to do, of what we allow our ears to hear and to believe and to, our minds can be swayed so easily by many different things, and we hear things on the news and we see things on Facebook, and we see a lot of things that sound really good, and we can see pictures that look wonderful, but they're all fake, and so we need to be aware of what we're listening to, what we're hearing, what we're believing, what we're trusting. And I think there's a little bit of that message in this eating of this scroll. I mean, there's so many different ways you can look at so much of this. And then chapter 11 starts that John was giving a measuring rod, and that's, we in our world today don't really measure much by rods, but a rod is a specified length, and a rod was, they would measure with that, or cubits, and we use a tape measure or a yardstick or a ruler or a meter stick, or for our measuring. And so he was to measure the temple of God and the altar and those who worship here, but don't measure the temple outside of the court. Why? Because that's for the Gentiles. It's given over to the nations. It's given over to the non-believers. And then here comes some of this stuff we don't really want to hear. It says they will trample over it for 42 months. That's 1,280 days, which also are 1,260 days, and so this is some of that end time stuff where we see, and in the Left Behind series that LaHaye and Jenkins, whatever his name, wrote several years ago, these prophets were there, and this was very much a part of one of those books. But so for 42 months, this period of 1,260 days, these two prophets are there, and they are prophesying, and they're talking, and there are two olive trees there that are symbolizing providing the light, because that was what they would burn, would be olive oil in their lanterns, and these two prophets are safe and secure. No one can harm them. I mean, they can send armies against them. They can shoot them with arrows. They can beat them with clubs. They can stone them. They can do whatever they want. But these two witnesses are they are protected, because it says if anyone wants to harm them, fire pours from their mouths and consumes their foes. Anyone who wants to harm them will be killed in that manner. So these two witnesses who stand there and testify to God, to Jesus, for this period of time, 42 months, 3.5 years. That's, it's messengers that are coming to the non-believers that are trying to get them to come to belief and to trust in God and to believe in Jesus as their Lord and Savior. And these two witnesses have authority to shut the sky so that no rain might fall. They can have authority over the waters to turn them to blood. They can strike the earth with plagues. I mean, these two witnesses, some say it's Moses and Elijah, and some say it's other Old Testament figures that are there. That's loose interpretation of a lot of things, but it doesn't matter who they are. What matters is that they witness to God's truth. They witness to God's love. They witness to the saving action of Jesus Christ, and yet people don't hear him. People don't listen. They don't change their ways. They don't come to God. And at the end of this 3.5 year time, in verse 7 says, when they have finished their testimony, the beast comes up from the bottomless pit, makes war on them, will conquer them and kill them, and they will lay dead there in the temple, or in that courtyard, for 3.5 days. And people, people are there rejoicing that they're dead, that they're not speaking anymore, that they're not doing anything, yet they lay there. And after that 3.5 days time, God sends breath back into these two witnesses and calls them up into heaven. To think about, someone being dead 3.5 days. That's, Jesus was in the grave that way. Lazarus, it was 4 days Lazarus had been dead, because, it was believed that, for a little while the spirit would hang around, but 3.5 days after these prophets they testified 3.5 years, and then 3.5 days they lay there with no breath in their bodies. They're lifeless. And then God raises them back to life. Verse 11, after 3 days, the breath of life from God entered them. They stood on their feet, and those that saw them were terrified. I would be too. To think of someone coming to life that way. And they were again called to heaven, and it says then in verse 14, the second woe has passed, the third woe is coming, and the seventh angel blows its trumpet. And I'm going to stop there for today. We've been enough. So tomorrow we'll probably pick up again there at verse 15 in chapter 11 and look at chapter 12, or as much of chapter 12 as our reading. So may you live in God's love and blessing today, and the joy of the season of Christmas be with you, each and every one.